afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. If I can get your attention, please. Hello. Well, my name is Robina Benson. I wanted to sincerely, warmly thank you all for attending the symposium today. This is Nisha's third year participating at DIEM, and we are just beyond excited. Today's panel, I am so honored to have some of the great minds in design in our showroom. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Mallory Roberts. She is, of course, a writer, design extraordinaire, as well as the co-curator of DIEM. And I would love to be able to give the mic over to her, and she's going to introduce our panelists, and we let the exciting talk begin. And by the way, before we start, I hope that you enjoyed the spread. We went all out for all of you. We love you guys. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Robina. And thank you so much, Nish, for this amazing setup. It's fabulous to be here. Thank you. So I'm Mallory Roberts Morgan, and as Robina said, I co-curated DIEM this year with Frances Anderton, and I'm a design writer and curator, and I work on all kinds of design-related projects. And today, we have three amazing panelists. Thank you so much for coming. And we wanted to discuss the topic, do designers need to become brands? I'll just introduce our panelists very briefly because I'm sure you all know who they are anyway. And we'll speak for about 40 minutes and then we'll open it up for questions. Martin Lawrence Poulard, is an incredible interior designer whose work is so often on the cover of AD that it just gets boring, quite honestly. No, I'm teasing. And is well known to many of us from television. He was on a TV show called $1 Million Decorator on Bravo. But Martin's an amazing interior designer, and we're very honored to have him here today. And one of the reasons why I wanted Martin to come here today is because Martin's primary business is design. He has a design firm doing residential and commercial, but you also have your own collection of furniture, your own collection of fabrics, and you do a lot of licensing projects. You have a lot of products for licensing. Which we will speak about a little later. Cliff Fong, one of my absolute favorite designers in Los Angeles. And Cliff, for me, is what you would call a little under the radar. He has an incredible clientele, does amazing projects, and is quite discreet. Although went to the most wonderful restaurant the other night that you designed, Cliff, and he was just so incredibly modest about it. Oh yeah, I designed this in a restaurant, and I walked in and I was like, oh, Cliff. It's called Pistola. It's wonderful. It's on Beverly, right? Beverly, 3rd Street. Cliff is also co-founded design gallery called Gallery Half. And again, a lot of people don't even know that he's involved there, but he actually has this retail outlet, which is very high-end, vintage, rare, incredible design pieces from all over the world. And Peter Dunham, the marvelous Peter Dunham, also an incredibly well-known interior decorator in his own right. Wonderful style. Just timeless, graceless, wonderful. And Peter is also the creator and owner, founder and owner of Hollywood at Home, which is a wonderful emporium of fabrics, homewares, and vintage goods. You're also a textile designer yourself, Peter. So Peter has two quite separate activities that of course are interconnected, but he's an interior designer and then has this brand which is quite its own entity. So very interesting business model. So do designers need to become brands? And the reason why this topic came up was actually from conversations at cocktail parties with Martin, which is absolutely true. I write about design, so I'm always, speaking to designers, and often the topic comes up: can you really make money just from decorating? Just from doing design jobs? So I think I'm going to open that up with you, Martin, because that's kind of the premise of. That's a good jumping off point.
Yeah, I mean it's a very interesting topic first and foremost, because yes, the design industry, it's an incredibly wonderful industry to be in the fact that we get to wake up every morning and be creative and do something that you love. Although some mornings I do not want to get up, but however, but in general, it's an incredible career. It is, however, a business, and it's a difficult business, because even though you may have clients that are spending millions of dollars on their homes, their budgets that they spend with you, that actually isn't the money that's coming into you. That's what they are actually spending. You make a very small fraction, a very small markup on that, and we have an enormous amount of overheads from your offices, whether you have a mortgage on them, whether you rent them, your staff, your insurances, I mean, all of those things. And so at the end of the day, it is not the easiest business to make money from, just being a designer. But as you know, I have spent the last 5 or 6 years really exploring how to turn my design business, how to turn the creativity and all of the press and all of the fantastic clientele and everything that I've had into another form of making money. And so product is, of course, a wonderful way to do that, and it's a fabulous extension for all of us, because you not only get to be creative with a product, you get to see other people using and buying your product, which is really a joy, and hopefully you make money from it.
So Peter, here you are with your, you have product. I mean, you created Hollywood at Home. So what's your experience been with, being a designer and decorating and doing all these fabulous design jobs, and then creating this separate entity which is purely product? What has that experience been like for you?
Well, can you hear me? Oh, great. Backtracking just one point, I think you can make money just being an interior designer, particularly in New York. In LA, it's a lot more challenging because people don't spend as much. So where I go to a project and say, it's going to cost you $100 a square foot minimum, or $150, they faint. In New York, if you tell them the fee is going to be $225 a square foot, they're like, oh, okay. So there's a big difference. So I think for us, there are 3 big impacts in LA. One, we have the space to be able to have product, warehouse it, produce it, have bigger studios. There are great workmen here who produce all the goods. So it's really tempting for us as designers to morph our design work into our kind of what I would call our side hobbies, which is, I think you can probably speak to this, kind of our passion. We don't get to have to listen to people's opinion, our clients saying no, they don't get it. We just do exactly kind of what we want. Hopefully it'll sell in the marketplace. So to me, I'd like to think that I can make money as a designer. I suspect Martin and Cliff both make great livings as well as designers, but the product is a sort of end result of the branding that we've achieved through our design work. So I see branding as a projection or a communication of our personal styles to a bigger public. So it used to be that, it was just magazines and people would see our portfolio and they would get, sooner or later a gist of it. Now it's been sort of, steroided. There's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's, it's just events like this where we're projecting our style identity in a, how can I put it? a much more crowded marketplace. So, you know, I have to fight Martin and I have to fight Cliff for attention. And luckily, in LA, we all get on. People from out of town just are completely flummoxed by that. But essentially, we all do slightly different thing, which is the point. But we need to communicate that in a very effective way today.
Well, this actually brings us to a good point, which is, you know, how do you define a good design brand? Is it a very singular vision and a very singular stylistic, you know, image? Or is it really about, you know, the product, the empire that you're building, the, you know, the TV shows, the, you know, the brand globally? You know, is building a good brand really more about communicating a specific style, or is building a good brand really about getting product out there?
We'll do a duet here.
Yeah. Why not? I think we should sing, actually. Should we do it in chorus? I have to say that I design many different styles for my clients. I don't want to pigeonhole myself ever into just being a designer of one particular look, which so many designers do and they build a career on. For me, it's more interesting and it's more challenging for my staff, and more creative for all of us to keep coming up with new, fresh ideas for different people. For instance, you mentioned, you know, I've had 2 back-to-back Architectural Digest covers. One was Tommy Hilfiger, which was completely nuts, sort of disco mania, Studio 54 on acid madness. The other one was very much more kind of this Mediterranean villa restoration with touches of 40s furniture, so sort of mid-century nods. So that's what is so exciting, to be able to do that. For me, I really like to be able to translate that now into the different product that we do. So like Peter, I have my own fabric line that I produce, that I do whatever I want to. I usually create it because I want to add that into a project I'm doing, and I think, well, you know, maybe the public would like to buy it as well. So that's kind of a wonderful way to do it. But then I've also got all of those licensing deals. I've got a fabric and wallpaper license. I have a tile license. I have a bathroom line. I have porcelain launching. I have silver launching. I have crystal launching. I have lighting launching next year. I've got fragrance. We've got fashion coming out. So there's many, many, many angles of the licensing and different layers of my branding that we're about to really get into. But the interesting thing is that a lot of those things are actually different styled. They certainly have a flavor, and they certainly have one of the aspects of my character that I like and want to bring into a product, but then don't all gel as one thing. So, which makes it exciting for me to do that. It really does.
Well, it's interesting because when I was speaking with all of you before, you know, when we were preparing the panel, I spoke to Cliff about licensing, and Cliff said something really interesting. He said, licensing can be the devil. So tell us a little bit about that, Cliff.
Well, you know, I'm fortunate in a way because I've had a few different careers, and my earlier career was in fashion and worked with a lot of brands. I was a buyer at first, and then I actually consulted for a few different designers, a few different international retailers. And in the way that the design market is expanding now, it's very similar to the way the fashion market expanded in the 80s, or excuse me, 90s, where, you know, prior to that, there was only maybe Ralph Lauren, and some people knew about Armani. In the 90s, it was the expansion of a huge contemporary market, something that would reach a wider demographic, something that allowed people who didn't live in luxury help define themselves in a certain way. And in the way that the interior design market or the design market, home furnishings market is expanding, it's very, very similar in that suddenly people realize that their lives, the way they live, can be an extension of their personalities, where before I think people felt obligated to go to IKEA or Ethan Allen or just a flea market, I'm not sure, or maybe no definition at all. They have a really expensive car, really beautiful clothes, and furniture that makes no, you know, personal expression. Very similar thing happened, I think, in the 90s or in the 60s and 70s with fashion, where a lot of the big European labels, Christian Dior, Yves Saint Laurent, Lanvin, sold licenses for a lot of their products. So companies could use the name without necessarily having to account directly with the creative vision of the originally branded company. And so throughout the 70s, 80s, maybe that was a good situation. But in the 90s, all of those fashion companies had to go through the pain of buying those licensees back, which cost them a lot. But now they own their image, they control their image, and a lot of those fashion companies are doing better than ever. For designers, we have a situation where I think anybody who's doing business, whether you're a consumer, a designer, a manufacturer, everybody's aware that you're in a very rapidly expanding market. So if you're a young creative person, there are a lot of corporations who are out there that are just waiting to get a piece of your pie. Where when you're young and creative, I think the idea is you just can't wait to create, or you can't wait to maybe express some kind of vision, or get your personality out there, or get your vision out there. Sometimes when you do that in a company that's willing to license something for you, you're not going to make the same deal as if you were maybe going to do it on your own, or find ways to do it on your own. That being said, one of the hardest things to do in life in general with any project is figuring out how to start. And these companies make it easy. But unfortunately, in fashion and in home furnishings, I think a lot of young people who aren't as savvy and knowing how to negotiate contracts, knowing exactly how to control the creative, I think a lot of people find that they, in some ways, may have sold their soul a little bit to just get out there. And that's why I would caution anybody against pursuing licensing before actually getting informed and finding out what it is that you can do yourself.
Well, Martin, do you think, and I mean all of you, do you think that the bigger the brand empire, so to speak, the greater the risk that the product will be thinner?
I think that you have to align yourself with the right brands. This one of the number one. When I started to be on television, I took this very high-powered attorney that basically the only reason why he's working with me is because I decorated his house 15 years ago, but. He has really helped guide all of the licensing and all of the TV shows that I've been. I started my own production company. I've produced and starred in 3 different series of my own in the UK in the last year, all of which are now being sold internationally. So we sort of have now learned to be able to control how my image is seen on TV, rather than the way Bravo, portrays you rolling around on the floor with a handbag, knocking somebody out. So we're controlling the way that my image is shown and the way my brand is being shown. And that is the same thing with the licenses. So my wonderfully high-powered attorney said to me, the most important word you're ever going to say is no. And so we've turned down the craziest licenses. One of which was male Spanx.
I was just going to say.
Yes.
Did you turn down the male pajamas?
I was rather horrified by the male Spanx one. But, and so the things that I have signed, it has been aligning myself with these iconic brands, people like Haviland Limoges. I've signed with one of the most famous French silver brands in the world. I've signed with one of the greatest fashion houses. I've signed with really iconic brands, even down to when I did my license with Schumacher. Schumacher's America's oldest privately owned family fabric business and sold in 32 countries. So the alignment was right for that particular point of branding. So it's all about, going back to what Cliff said, yes, if you're like somebody young or young in the business and you've designed something great and suddenly somebody likes it and they can see a potential to make money, maybe they're going to jump on it and offer you a license or something. That could be great, but also it could be really a detriment because a few years down the line when you're a bit more experienced, maybe that product's going to be worth a fortune and you could have owned all of it rather than owning 10% of it. Well, so again, it's all about really picking and choosing your battles, knowing when to say no, knowing how to project your own image as much as you can, and really making the right decisions.
Well, Peter, it's interesting because you were, a very well-known, you were a highly, highly regarded critically acclaimed interior designer. And then was it in 2007 you started Hollywood at Home? And you said to me the other day that even though it's not your name, Hollywood at Home has actually brought you more recognition than any of the design work that you did that was, splashed over all the major interior magazines for years and years.
Well, I actually think it's my textiles that did that, because they came first. They were a hobby. I like collecting textiles. And then, honestly, I couldn't really be bothered to go shopping for textiles. Just don't say it to anybody here, but whatever. And so, I like to it's easier for me sometimes to make my own textile for a project, like Martin was just saying, than it is for me to go and find that really specific thing that, I don't know where to find. So I started producing fabrics, and they started rolling along, and I did a show house, and I put them on the walls, and people said, where can you buy them? And I got into a showroom, and then I was like, well, it'd be kind of nice to have our own kind of office showroom, so that's what we did over on Almont, the first Hollywood at Home. So I didn't want to call it Peter Dunham, because I figured, maybe other designers wouldn't exactly want to go with a shopping bag to a client that said another designer's name. So I'd actually owned the name Hollywood at Home for about 15 years. I was, I couldn't sleep one night, and I was trying to buy web domains. That's what I kind of was doing. And I was like, Hollywood at Home's available. So I kind of bought it, and I kept on paying for it 10 years. And then one day I was like, let's just use that as the background for a showroom that would sell me, would sell other designers. And we were selling Martin when we first opened, and other friends, and we were kind of this very cohesive community, and blah, blah, blah. So out of that, but what projected me to the public in terms of visual communication, and this is what I think of as branding in terms of designers, we are communicating our vision as designers. I think all of us here have very different visual styles that we communicate, and we have to communicate them also in a way that works for us. So, the other thing is that I think that what we do has to have a lot of brand integrity, so it's not confusing to the public. I like to do a lot of contemporary work, but people see my image because of my fabrics as being kind of hippie deluxe, traveler, ethnic, layered, blah, blah, blah. And believe it or not, I actually do really like doing kind of minimal modern work as well. But people don't associate me with that. So I don't push that as a brand because I want to sell my product. And I feel that brand integrity is very strong. So Martin, who's all about drama in the way that people perceive him, isn't really very successfully, I believe, going to channel Barbara Barry overnight. It's going to be really challenging.
I do hope not.
And Cliff, who has a very poetic, beautiful, kind of edited, artistic kind of style, isn't very successfully going to morph that into Bobby Trendy. It's just not going to happen. So I think if you work it with the thing that what works for you, what's honestly integral to you, you have to do what's honest. Then I think your branding can be successful.
Well, this is actually something that you and I discussed, Cliff, because I introduced you as being very discreet. You have an extraordinary, celebrity clientele, and a lot of the work that you do is never published, and you are very discreet as a person as well. So, what about what you do in branding? Like, what happens to somebody like you? Because Peter made a really interesting point when we were chatting. He said, the thing that's really important about branding for all of us designers is, at the end of the day, you can't sell future design projects. But, when you're getting a little creaky, you can sell the brand if there's actual product, or, so that ultimately, once you've established that you are somebody of talent, I guess there's a point where that comes into play.
Well, yeah, I think sort of what Peter and Martin were saying earlier is one of the most important things to do if you're going down the road of branding is to really know your market. And a lot of young designers who might be obsessed with creating a brand, I think that's putting the cart before the horse a little bit, because really you have to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are, take full account of what they are, find a way to work around them, move forward, grow, create a dialogue with your work, and then you'll find what there is to brand off of. There have been times, a few times in my career where I've been approached by a furniture company or approached by a textile company, and I love the idea of doing something. I just didn't feel like it was really clear what I wanted to do or what would make sense, because I also didn't feel like I had a market. If you think about Axel Vervoort, I think there are very few living designers that are revered in the way that he is. But if you were to think about him as a brand, it's very, very narrow what his actual appeal is or what he could sell possibly to a greater market. Where Nate Berkus, on the other hand, has a very different demographic, a really wide audience. Martin, for instance, has probably the lion's share of the design demographic and can be really broad in his expression, but not as broad as to do Manspanks. So I think and it's really important to know exactly what you want to share.
If I eat some of this, I might be needing them.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll take the Manspanks deal. Can you just send anything?
Peter's not too proud.
Yeah. But I think one of the things I really believe in, and I think, unfortunately, I think this is lost on certain generations earlier or later than ours, the younger generation, is I think to pursue a career growth organically, and in some ways because of technology, social media, etc. Organic is something really different now than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I don't think we'd be having a conversation on branding because it wouldn't necessarily be on everybody's mind. But now it is, and I think people are often pushing to be branded and branding things that are not as substantial as the good work people in this room do, but more personality or something not about quality or craft. And I think that's a bit of a dangerous thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was just thinking about a young designer who I work with at Hollywood at Home called Zach Profera, who came up with a product that resonated with the public. Really clean, simple, lovely lines, very easy to use. And he was just genius in communicating it to the public and the identity, essentially, I think, through Instagram. He's a 30-year-old designer. He's handsome. His product is lovely. He worked every angle visually through great photography and knowing exactly how to hit it. And he, in less than 2 years, has created a very strong brand. It's a different world. It's kind of this fascinating thing that you've got to do what works for you. I am not a designer with big biceps and really nice photography skills. So that's not going to work for me. But it does for him, and I think we all have to find our way. I mean, Martin's amazing at TV. I mean, it's his background, if you don't mind me saying, Rada and everything. So we have to find the way we can do it.
Well, again, in our conversations, Cliff made a great point, which is that this whole branding thing, and you said it earlier as well, it's new, and it's, such an important topic now. So another question I have for you is, have you ever worked with a brand consultant, or have you ever gotten outside help? And does one need that?
There are, by the way, again, what happens the second that you end up being on TV for any reason, you suddenly have all these agents and people calling you up out of the blue that suddenly are your best friends that normally wouldn't even smile at you. And they all want to basically sell you off to some sort of branding thing because they want to make a commission out of it. And it's a very scary thing to navigate that, actually, because you get people throwing these huge numbers at you, and like I was pulled into, I did some show with Andy McDowell for the ABC network, for the kids network, basically. And suddenly I had all these ABC meetings about creating kids' toys and like some online product with kids' toys where the kids could go on and they could like press a button and put a pink nose and blue eyes and everything. And suddenly I thought to myself, hang on a minute, that has nothing to do with anything that I do and doesn't make any sense. But you end up with these people trying to push you to do it. So I actually cut ties with all of that. And I do all of my own licensing with my attorney. And so I'm able to control what I want to do and what I don't want to do. But I've been in a very lucky position that I've had a lot of people offer me things along the way, and I've managed to pick and choose. I just want to say something else, though, which is really crazy that's going on, because we're talking about now suddenly there's this whole new branding thing. Every celebrity, every person on a daytime soap suddenly is an interior designer and putting out a line of sheets or dishes or candles, and they're suddenly an expert on everything to do with design. I would love to see one of them try and decorate a room with a client.
Great idea for a new reality TV show. Let's make them decorate. Well, Peter, here you are, a decorator, and then you started Hollywood at Home. I mean, did you reach a point where you were like, what, how do I, now what? And did you seek outside help?
It's a great help. I think I felt that I've grown my product lines and my identity fairly organically, i.e. slowly, I think over time. I've been at it for close to 20 years and, building up. I was really lucky from the get-go that I had a lot of friends in New York where I lived before who were in the press. And I don't know why, but it was part of my kind of community and my tribe in New York. So they were very supportive when I was no one and I had no talent and I didn't know what I was doing, of like throwing me in the deep end, like Marion McAvoy when she was the head of editor-in-chief of House Beautiful, made me do a show house, and I was like between like, Waldo, Barbara Barry, and Suzanne Reinstein, and like, who is this? Like, who's this? And I ended up doing the kitchen in the middle of it. So I was always very lucky with that, and I used that tool very strongly. And I've forgotten the question.
You developed your design
Okay.
business, you developed Hollywood at Home, and then
So-
you kind of get to an impasse.
So, you do. I'm at the point where I've spent the last, let's say, close to 10 years developing a brand identity outside of my interior design practice directly. And you're faced with, how do I take it to the next level? And I've been discussing that, with people who are much more talented than I am at running a business, at being able to do with that. I right now have 3 businesses, and I don't know if you can see, but I'm battling gray fast. And it's a lot to do. It's a lot to do even now, just handling 10 interior design projects. They can suck the life out of you. So the other parts almost are like the things I enjoy doing after work. But yes, I think there comes a point where, like Martin's really successfully done, is grab the bull by the horn, make deals that make you some money. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to retire, hope to retire soon, and we need to be able to afford somebody who's going to push that wheelchair.
I'll come and do it, darling. And Cliff, what about you? Here you are with your successful design business, your wonderful gallery half. Where do you take it from here? And where does branding or not play into that?
I think I could probably go on just the way things are and be very happy as long as I got to work with nice people and they were interesting projects. I know everybody is kind of obsessed with the idea of branding now. I think I had always I'd been really tentative about it because I don't think I've ever felt like my personality was worthy of or capable of actually being sensationalized or slung in some way to propel a brand if I didn't have something worthy to share. I also am a little bit shy about people getting too interested in me, and I'd rather people concentrate on the work. So I've been very kind of tentative and reserved about any kind of bigger expression than what I make through my projects or through Gallery Half. However, there of late there have been a lot of different creative inspirations for me, and some of them relate to business, and some of them relate to product. And so in the next, 6 months or so, there will be some changes. I think after now figuring out exactly how things work and how they work well for me or for us as a team, I think it gives me the freedom to think a little bit more about how I might expand my experience a little bit. I generally find that the money just takes care of itself, and I know a lot of times the preoccupation with branding has to do with this need to always be making money. But we live in a city where there's constant stimulation and constant distraction, and a lot of that can change how you view your work, how you live, why you live the way you do potentially. So for me, I think any designer could probably do fine on their own without this idea of making products, especially if they provided a good service. Because it's never about how much money you make, it's really just about how much money you spend. And everybody in this room probably knows somebody who makes more than they do, who for some reason is always broke, or is always leveraged, or is pushing the envelope. So people who do pursue branding just for money, I think that can be very productive, but I think for me that would be a difficult way to do it. And only now am I at the time where I sort of feel like I have something that I would like to share or do, or now maybe I potentially have created, although not intentionally, created a market that has some interest in what we do.
Well, this raises another good point, because as your empire grows, Martin, what's that costing you? That's a big structure to.
What's interesting is that I feel like a few years ago, when I only had like 2 or 3 people working for me, I was making more money than I am with 28 assistants, which is what I have now. So that's.
So how much money needs to go into, making an empire?
It's crazy. Funnily enough, on the product side, because I have a small team that oversees my product lines and things, and basically I design everything, and we do the follow through, and so that side of it all takes care of itself, and then all the licenses are done. You design it and you tweak it and you take the design meetings and you sign off on the samples or not, and then it gets produced and you haven't really got to think about it again. However, to make a product successful, it's not just about, oh, this glass is really pretty and I'm going to put my name on it and we're going to stick it in a shop and that's the end of it. I'll wait for the checks to come. That is not the way it works if you want to be successful. The way it works is you design that glass, you go out on the road and you promote that glass. Everywhere you are, you drink out of that glass. You're photographed with that glass. It sits in your interiors. You put it in your book. I mean, it is a commitment to the product. And particularly, one of the things that's in a lot of the licensing deals that come across the table, also people now understand that they either want to use your image to promote the product, or they want to make sure that there's a backup, that you go out, you do meet and greet, you promote the vendor, the shop, the product. And by the way, that takes an enormous amount of time. I've just done a national tour to promote a tile line I have for Anne Sachs. And I mean, it is really hard work.
Well, I was speaking to a designer friend in Paris, India, Madhavi, the other day, and she said to me, you cannot make money through these licensing deals because they have to sell so many of that product in order for you to get an interesting royalty check. And she said...
There's 2 sides to that. I mean, India's got... By the way, India makes quite a lot of money out of her deals. I know one of the licensing people she works with, so don't believe everything you hear. If she asks you to split that dinner check, to say no, you pick it up, love. But... that's why you have to choose your licensing deals correctly.
Right.
I have a deal where there's certain product that we make that sells for over $100,000. So the checks that I get coming in from that are a lot greater than the product that they have to sell, 350 yards of. So it depends on the product. It depends what your ratio you get. It depends what your deal is. There are some companies that will only pay you 3%. There are some companies that will pay you 20%. There are some companies that pay you 10%. You have to understand what that is. You have to know where you want to place yourself. And for instance, if you want to do a deal with Target, like a flash sale deal with Target, like a Missoni did recently, their percentage was quite low, but they had a guaranteed minimum of what was going to be sold. And anything that was oversold on that, they got a higher percentage, and it was more of a more enticing deal for them. But they already knew that they were going to get $5 million for the licensing of their images. Whether Target sold the $50 million worth of stuff they needed to sell to bring that money in or not. And so, again, it's all about knowing the deal, looking at the placement, understanding how and what you're going to make money out of it.
Well, the other comment that she made was really, if you want to make real money, you not only have to design the glass, drink out of it, but you've got to produce it, you've got to manufacture it, and you've got to sell it yourself. And you would know a lot about that, Peter.
I honestly don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, I think this is such an interesting panel to me because I'm learning a lot from my two esteemed colleagues. They both have very different points of view, I think, visual and in their approach to life. So it's really phenomenal to kind of have the opportunity to sit down here and actually listen and not face off. But it takes a lot of investment and a lot of work to produce your own product. I think Martin can address that with his own textiles. His Schumacher line, I mean, I hate to use this term, old New York decorator, he can kind of phone it in. He can take his image, some ideas, they'll do all the work. They have a studio with like 25 people. They do nothing but that, and they do the CAD work, and they do the samples, whatever. On our own product, we have to sit there and like micro it ourselves, and we have to go to the printers, and we have to look at the strike-offs, and we have to tweak that blue or tweak the green. It's a labor of love. I don't know personally whether, at the end of the day, my business manager would probably say, do not make fabrics or do not make, furniture. I do because I love doing it. I use it in my projects. It, again, refers back to my laziness of going shopping. It's easier and more fun for me to make my own stuff and use it in my projects when I need new material. I make a living from it. It's really nice. During the recession, when we're all, or at least I was, decorating less and my projects were smaller and I was making less margin on them, I had these two other businesses that were generating income. It's great. And the potential is enormous. I mean, look at Martin. He's got this product and he's going for it. There's tons of it. I hope you're making a shitload of money, darling, because you deserve it. But, essentially, there are only so many projects that I can handle as an interior designer. But if I come out with a successful glass and a lot of people want to buy it, it's passive income. I mean, it's just coming in, and the potential's enormous. I mean, look at anyone who's been with Thomas O'Brien, with whoever he has his line. It's huge. It's been there for like a decade and a half, bringing in money. So the potential is enormous for it.
The other thing I'm going to just add on to yours is that the interesting thing is that both you and I have built these fabric businesses, and which is wonderful, and everybody loves your fabric. Now, the reality is that maybe in 10 years' time, that is actually, somebody will come along and buy that and give you the money to retire on it because you've built your own line, you've built your own product. And so, you may have a Schumacher come along and go, oh my God, we've always wanted your fig leaf design or whatever it is, and buy the whole thing. And that's the wonderful thing about building your own brand that you own, because then you actually own it.
Yeah.
And you can sell it. Because like Peter said, God forbid, one of us, you lose your eyesight tomorrow or something happens and you can't keep decorating. What have you got? You haven't really got anything, because we as designers, people hire us because they want us. They don't hire us because they want, our assistants.
Then what do we do without the site? I guess we make chenille then or something, right? Where we could just feel it.
But no, I was going to say is the fact that you've got something like ultra suede and fur. The reality is that you've got something that you can sell. You've got this business, this textile line or furniture line or whatever it is that you can physically sell.
So do designers need to become brands? I think the answer might be yes.
Well, if you want to get jobs, yes. What is
Yeah.
branding? Branding is communicating your identity.
Right.
How can any of us go out there and get jobs unless it's with, your family members and friends and family? Effectively, I think if you want to go to a certain level of jobs, you need to communicate, at the very least, as interior designers, some identity. And isn't that what is branding? I mean, I don't know.
It's exactly that. Voila. I think it's time to open up for questions because we're running out of time, but this has been a really interesting discussion, and I'm sure there's a few questions out there, so I want to make sure we have a little time. Does anybody have a question? Yep.
I actually have a comment from hearing them because I'm not familiar with you, and I'm hearing that you're... What? I'm actually listening. I'm not coming with preconceptions. But I come from a different world and a different outlook. And in athletics, where everybody has their own brand, of course, too, I would say that, and I'm going to mention several men who are all successful in their own way and deservedly so. I would see you as branding the way LeBron James brands. I would see you as Kevin Durant, and I would see you as Steve Nash or Dirk Nowitzki, all of who sell and all of who do their primary work, of which they're outstanding at, but have a different outlook of how much time they want to spend with
So do you have a question, or is that just a comment? It's a comment. Okay, thank you. And does anybody have a question?
If you want to answer it, you can answer it as if it's a question.
Are there any questions? Yes?
How long did it take you to become a brand? For you to walk into any place and they say, oh, okay, I know this person.
Oh my God, I wish. Ask Martin that. No
So
one
the
recognizes
question was,
me.
how long did it take you to become a brand, to be recognized?
I mean, I've had my interior design business in one form or the other for over 20 years, and it's the creating of product has only really been in the last 7 years, and I was producing my own fabric line, little furniture line, and I already had my first license with Schumacher before I even went on TV. But what the TV did, of course, it exposes you to a massive amount of public. I mean, our Bravo show was airing to 60 countries around the world with approximately 250 million people per episode worldwide, which is unbelievable. So suddenly you are opened up to these extraordinary amounts of people that... I was in Istanbul 3 weeks ago in a swimming pool, and suddenly some lady jumped in screaming, going, oh my God, I love you. And she was like this lady from Tibet. I mean, who knew they had Bravo in Tibet? So, and I was like, is there any product you need in Tibet?
You just asked a question. Is there anybody else who has a question? We'll get back to you. Any more questions? No. You wanted to ask another one?
Absolutely. So the best way to brand your product is through television, correct?
Not necessarily. I mean, certainly the TV thing worked for me for some things because it opened up a much wider audience. The best way to brand yourself is to be really good at what you do, first and foremost. So everybody here is on this panel are brilliant at their certain art form of decorating and designing, and because of that, they are all strong enough to become a brand in their own right.
One last question?
So what is the best way to get your product on TV?
So what is the best way to get your product on TV?
Pay hard, cold cash to a network.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Advertising.
Yeah, and listen, if you've got something interesting enough, there are constant shows, breakfast shows, morning shows, daytime shows. There are so many different things that are interested in new and interesting things that, with the right doors open, you can get in there and promote them. You can absolutely get on. You can almost take anything you want onto Good Morning LA or whatever that show is. It's literally, if you have an interesting enough project and a product rather, you can get it out there. There are ways.
I think we're going to wrap it up, and I just want to thank Martin, Cliff, and Peter so very much for coming here today. It was wonderful. Very privileged to have you here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
And just to let everybody know, the next panel today is an open forum. It's called Social Entrepreneurship, Very Good or Too Good to Be True. It's about companies that say that when they sell something to you, they're doing something good with it. And there's a very, very interesting person who's going to be speaking, Jeff Denby, who has a fascinating company. So I encourage you to go. Thank you so very much for coming.
Thanks
you.
for being a great moderator. This was the best panel I've ever been on. Thanks
Thank
to
you,
you.
Peter Dunham. Thank you.